Hey guys, so my case study is on the 1985 Nevado del Ruiz Lahar. So just some context about the location. The Nevado del Ruiz volcano is the tallest of the Colombian stratovolcanoes as well as the northernmost. It has a summit elevation of 17,500 feet, which allows the summit to be snow-capped even though it's so close to the equator. It was formed by, or it is still formed today, by the convergent boundary between the Nazca and South American plate, where the denser oceanic Nazca plate subducts underneath the less dense continental South American continental plate, which then produces the volcano. So something that I really wanted to point out was that the volcano has a recorded past of deadly eruptions that produce deadly lahars. In 1595, it killed about 636 people, and in 1845, it killed about 1,000 people. And then, of course, the one I'm going to talk about today, the November 13th, 1985 eruption, it erupted for the third time in the past 400 years and produced these deadly lahars that ended up killing the most people yet, as you will soon find out. So basically, I just kind of wanted to explain what a lahar is, as a lot of people aren't really familiar with it. A lahar is a mud flow of volcanic origin. Basically, what you need is hot pyroclastic flows, which are fast-moving currents of hot gas and rock, or tephra, tephra being rock fragments or particles ejected by a volcanic eruption. And essentially, these currents can reach speeds of up to 450 miles an hour and get to temperatures of 1,830 degrees Fahrenheit, which is insanely hot. So basically, when you have these hot pyroclastic flows and airfall tephra, you get the melting of the ice cap summit. And essentially, these large lahars are produced. And in this case study in particular, there was a lake in the summit crater, which was destroyed by the eruption, and its hot and acidic waters ended up really accelerating the melting of the ice and snow around it. So as you can kind of tell, lahar is definitely a multiple hazard event. You have the eruption and the pyroclastic flows. You have the lahars themselves, as well as the huge mass wasting events that occur with them, as well as flooding. So basically what I want to show in this example is I just wanted to basically show you guys what a lahar can look like. There wasn't any good ones of the Nevado del Ruiz lahar itself, but I just pulled these from some Japan ones. So basically, I just want to show like how powerful they are. They can create like immense shaking periods where you can't even hear each other when you're yelling across the room. They're just that loud. As you see, this lahar is just plowing through everything in its path. People don't really, they kind of have like the misconception it's just like a muddy, flood because it's like a mud flow, but they don't realize how powerful and fast these things are moving. And basically, you can get like these giant lahars moving at speeds of 35 miles an hour, bringing with them uprooted trees, giant boulders, cars, whatever else it can tow with it. In fact, I took a little testimony from a Colombian geology student who was at the Nevado del Ruiz event, and he was standing on his hotel, and he said that since the building was made of cement, I thought that it would resist, but the boulder-filled mud was coming in such an overwhelming way, like a wall of tractors racing through the city, racing through everything. And as you can see, like, it's pretty evident how that could happen. Like, you have huge boulders just coming through with these lahars and flowing in incredibly turbulent waters. Okay. So basically, the 1985 lahar itself, it was kind of an unexpected event with no real evacuation order. Basically, what happened was that it began erupting on November 13th, 1985 at 3:06 p.m. and later that day at 7 o'clock p.m., the Red Cross ordered an evacuation. However, the evacuation was called off as the ashfall stopped shortly after they issued it. So people stayed in town, right? So at 9 o'clock p.m., molten rock began to erupt out of the summit crater. And basically it created these pyroclastic flows and tephra, and airfall tephra that ended up creating these giant lahars. And no one knew because there was a storm obscuring the view of the summit. So you had like all these lahars coming, and basically lahars were greater than 130 feet thick in some places and traveling at speeds greater than 30 miles an hour. And basically, they were just bursting through dams and trudging through all the river valleys, taking whatever they can with them. And they grew to 4 times their original volume just by traveling through the valleys themselves. And by the time it reached Armero, it was so huge that it killed 3/4 of the town people that lived there, either by drowning or burial in just a few minutes. So basically, we had 23,000 people who died and 15,000 animals killed. It left 4,500 injured and 8,000 homeless, as well as generated a huge loss of property, communications, and supplies. Not only that, but there was 3,400 hectares of agricultural land that was lost. And this was especially terrible for this place because it was actually the farming center for rice, coffee, cotton, and stuff like that, because of the region's fertility from the enriched mineral deposits from Nevado del Ruiz, which is unfortunate because the thing that made it so prosperous ended up destroying it. So, and on top of that, there was a $7.7 billion in costs. And just to give you guys kind of a context of that, that's 1/4 of Colombia's gross national product in 1985, which is equivalent to the United Kingdom spending $450 billion for one natural hazard. So essentially, these lahars, they caused this eruption to become the second deadliest volcanic hazard in the 20th century and South America's deadliest eruption period. All right. So a little bit more of the aftermath. Here's like a picture of the village of Armero before the lahars hit, and then here's it after. And you can definitely see just how this lahar just came through and destroyed everything in its path. Basically, after this, there was a short supply of clean water and medical supplies. The towns that were affected by lahars, everyone there had to be relocated. The rescue and aid missions, it was really hard for them because survivors were scattered over a wide area and buried in mud. The mobility was really hard, was basically no mobility on land. So aircrafts became the main method for search and rescue missions. The Colombian military, Red Cross, and civil defense personnel basically aided all rescue activities, supply distributions, and establishing field medics and shelters. And the Colombian president actually was able to get foreign aid within 24 hours after the incident from over 30 countries and numerous individuals. So I just want to kind of touch upon the faults in planning and management. So essentially there were 51 weeks of warnings through steam eruptions and minor earthquakes, which is enough to worry the communities, but not enough to convince the authorities that this was a real threat. Also, there's no equipment or skilled geologists in the country. Therefore, they had to bring in their own experts from out of country, as well as seismographs that were required to monitor the volcano. The government declared the risk maps as too alarming, so there were risk maps created before this event happened. Only 10 copies were distributed, which means there was barely any education or awareness. And the National Bureau of Geology and Mines actually declared that a moderate eruption would produce a 100% probability of mud flows. Yet the government dismissed the report as too alarming, and authorities didn't want to evacuate people until assured of necessity, which ended up costing them thousands of lives. Also, people lived in these valleys with a history of lahars. The village of Armero was actually built on top of the previous 1845 mudflow deposits, and it grew to be home to 27,000 people because it was the easiest place to construct. However, if they didn't do this, they would have saved so many lives, as history ended up repeating itself and a lahar once more came through. There was also a false sense of security from public messages. There was a priest and the mayor were telling people on public messaging systems to remain calm and stay inside. However, that ended up being a huge mistake, as many people ended up dying that way. There's also the fact that they called off the evacuation. They basically underestimated the power of the volcano, as well as didn't take into account the unpredictability of eruptions themselves. And finally, there was no plan of action. The government, even 3 days after the disaster happened, there was no plan of action. Therefore, government aid couldn't reach the people who were really in need. All right, so what was learned? So basically, the government began to really take these threats seriously after all of this happened. They learned that they had to educate and generate public awareness for this kind of hazard, which led to all these things here in the bullets. Basically, they established warning and evacuation plans. They were able to outline planning areas, identify hazard zones, as well as evacuation route. They did population and property censuses, and generated procedures on rescue, medical aid, security, and alerting. There's also the 1986 public education campaign, where schools educated students on volcanic hazards and what to do if Nevado del Ruiz erupted once more. And of course, Red Cross. They circulated thousands of flyers to the public about the volcanic hazard with info about the new evacuation warning systems. And also they had hazard maps, which were finally produced, and these posters were distributed for towns at risk. They basically show the appropriate protective action in response to the siren warning system, which was developed to basically let the public know any kind of possible threat from volcanic activity, and especially lahars. All right, so essentially that's it. I just wanted to wrap this all up and just kind of note how we just can't really underestimate nature, because it's incredibly powerful and unpredictable, and we just have to be ready for any kind of natural hazard at all times, and not only when it's of imminent danger. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this case study, and I hope you learned a lot about lahars and this in general. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.